and we're still talking about the molecule, and we're going to go in and talk about the human molecule, which is based on a higher correspondence of the molecules in the atoms. And keep in mind that in the molecules and among the atoms, we have, there's thousands of different ones. And the basic idea of the molecule we always want to keep in mind is that when individual atoms of different kinds join, they create molecules with properties totally different than themselves. And then the molecules join together and they create higher life forms. So to create your physical body, the atoms had to join together to create molecules. Molecules had to join together to create cells. And when you think of just the creation of a cell, I think there's like something like 30 trillion atoms or something in just one cell. And then there's that many more cells making your body. And when you think of the numbers, it's just boggles the mind. Uh, how many, how that you have a whole universe just within your one body alone. And then you kind of feel small when you think that you're just one of over 7 billion people on the planet. And the amount of matter taken up by the people on the planet is just a very small amount of the planet itself. And then the planet is just, it would take 1 million Earths to create the mass of just our one sun. So our sun is bigger, has more mass, more atoms in it than 1 million Earths. And so that size seems a lot, but when you think that in our galaxy, there are at least 200 billion stars and solar systems. And then in the known universe, there's billions of galaxies with billions of star systems in each one. So that it just boggles the mind how big everything is. And these people that say they've had a vision of the whole universe, I've never had anyone explain the depth of it. It was interesting in one of Joseph Smith's revelations, it says that God could not reveal to him the fullness of his glory because if he did, he would not be able to remain in the physical body. So, in other words, the glory of God, the expanse of infinity, or in the unlimited creation is so great that if if we could put our consciousness around it, we wouldn't even be able to remain on uh, in, in our physical body. Uh, it's kind of an interesting idea. So anyway, the basic molecule we're going to focus on creating is the same one Jesus did. This is like a foundation molecule. And there's two foundation molecules that we know about. One is the 12 units and the other is the 7. Shambhala is based on a molecule of 7 and the hierarchy is based on the molecule of 12 units plus the Christ as the symbolic center link to which links to Shambhala, which is linked up. And we have this linkage that goes from when the molecular order is established, there's links from the lower to the higher. And right now, among the subatomic particles and the atoms and the cells, they are linked, where the life of God flows through these things and stimulates life. But humanity is not linked. the hierarchy is linked and Shambhala is linked. The higher lives are linked and the lower lives within us are linked, but we have to link up humanity so that the flow from our source, who is God, flows from the high to the low, and the link is set. So the molecule, I've always taught, has 12 units, 24 people, 12 males and 12 females. And it was interesting, I come across this book where this guy found this, there's several regressionists that have found people that were alive at the time of Christ. And this person found this guy that was an Essene, and he was familiar with Jesus. And I give this quite a bit of credibility because a lot more than people channeling, because when people channeling, they come up with all kinds of things that are contradictory. But I find when you regress a person and they really are in a deep state and they go back, what they reveal is quite credible, and they oftentimes reveal things that can be proven to be true. Like in the regress state, many people have gone back and retrieved information and then later found that information to be true. And so anyway, this quote is from the book, The Power of the Magdalene. And here's the quote. It's important to understand that the discipleship system that Yeshua set up was designed to mirror the greater symbolism of the universe. The balance of the Father, Mother, God was mirrored in the balance of male and female disciples. So there were 6 circles of 12, making 72 male disciples, and 6 circles of 12, making 72 female disciples, a total of 144 disciples in all. The names of the first circle of 12 male disciples have come down to you and are well attested. However, much less is known about the first circle of female disciples, and we can talk about that now. So anyway, he points out that the corresponding female to Jesus, he says, was Mary Magdalene, and there's several people that have been regressed to that time period, and it's not clear if they were married or not. Some had the impression they were married, and some had the impression that they just had a very strong relationship. But anyway, there's a lot of evidence that Mary Magdalene was his female correspondent in the molecule.
Didn't you have to be married to be a rabbi?
Yeah, Jesus was called a rabbi, but people don't know for sure if he was called that just out of respect in the Bible or whether he was a real rabbi. I kind of doubt if he was a real rabbi, because rabbi just means teacher. So in the Bible where he's called a rabbi, it's quite possible they were just referring to him as a teacher. There's 2 or 3 that have been regressed to that time period, and one of them believed that he was married to Mary Magdalene, and the other that was regressed that I read about said they had a close relationship, but they didn't reveal whether or not they were actually married. So that's interesting.
JJ, why do you think it is that you haven't seen more about past lives yourself?
I don't know. I haven't been able to find anybody to take me back. I'm a strong mental person, and I find that mental people have don't go back very good. It's kind of interesting. Now, I've had several things revealed to me, but uh, as being regressed, I haven't found anyone to
Well,
regress.
I wasn't referring to regression. I meant like just picking up on it or being able to see it or revealed or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah, I'd like to find more about my past lives, but, and I've been able to take a lot of people back to their past lives. And it's interesting when you get somebody in a really deep state that they go back like they're actually there. And then you get some really interesting information. Okay, with the 24, uh, he says there are 6 circles, and my impression of what happened back then was there was a link made with the originating 12, which was reestablished on the day of Pentecost. And I think these others were kind of like training molecules that perhaps they, soul contact of a group is so difficult that he he organized these as molecules, but I'm not, I wouldn't guarantee that they were all linked. I think the main link was with the first, and then Jesus was only there for like 3 years. So he wasn't there long enough to really solidify the molecular order, because unfortunately, after he left the scene, it pretty much fell apart. Uh, um, he told the apostles that to go out and teach all nations, and the originating 12 went to all the different parts of the world and taught about the principles and taught about the Christ, and also tried to teach about the molecular order, and they were all killed. And apparently the rest of the organization lost the vision. They didn't understand why there had to be 24, why there had to be males and females. They didn't understand about the balance of energies. And so the teaching was lost a short time after Christ left. It's interesting that before the throne of God, it gives that molecular number. In the book of Revelations, it says this: and round about the throne, that's the throne of God, were 24 seats. And upon the seats I saw 24 elders sitting, clothed in white raiment, and they had on their heads crowns of gold. So around the throne of God were 24 elders. Now, elder comes from the Greek word presbyteros, which means an ancient one. So it doesn't necessarily mean a male elder. It just means that these were 24 ancient ones. So there were 12 that represented female energy and 12 male energy, but in that higher realm, they were all probably achieved quite a state of balance. So their energies were much more balanced than a correspondent would be here in the flesh. Now, in the marriage relationship, Jesus says that they are no more twain, but one flesh. Therefore, the human Adam is the male and female united. They become like one life. And like I say, for molecular purposes, this doesn't have to involve romantic relationships. It just has to involve the sharing of energies. And in a molecule, you can have different people take the places of the person there. If, for instance, you have 24 gathered at one time, and maybe one or two cannot be at a particular gathering, you could substitute the males and females to create the balance of energies. Now, both energies of male and female are equal importance. Even the gods of our humanity has shifted between male and female. During the Piscean age, the female, and also the age before that, uh, the age of Aries, and Taurus, the male energy was very dominant. It's kind of funny how the male energy was so dominant in the age of Pisces, because Pisces is the most female of all the signs. Yet maybe because it's so female, it had a corresponding male dominance to kind of balance it off or something. But it was a very emotional time period. We fought all the wars and the crusades on a very emotional level. It was feeling and desire against feeling and desire, and this so the male energy dominant. We have a male idea of God, of Jehovah, of even in most Eastern religions, the gods are male. But in ancient times, especially like in Atlantis, the female energy was stronger. And in ancient times, they worshipped goddesses. In ancient Greeks, goddesses were important among them. And so the gods switch back and forth between male and female even. But the word Elohim itself is a combination, represents a combination of male and female energy. El represents power and strength of the male, and the Him part represents the female. Elohim represents the idea of male and female uniting with strong covenant to create the heavens and the earth.
Doesn't it also mean council of gods? Council?
Well, council kind of represents the meaning of Elohim, because Elohim is plural, but used with a singular verb. And so what is plural that is used with a singular verb, and the word council is? You say the council is. Even though the council is composed of many, you say a council is, and the Bible begins with the word Elohim, creates singular, uses the singular for create, like it's just one thing creating, yet the word God, Elohim, is plural. So some scholars can't figure out, well, why was that the case? And this is why they translated the word in the beginning, God, singular, even though Elohim is plural, because create is a singular verb. It literally reads, in the beginning, the gods, plural, creates. And so if it was really plural, you say they create, you don't say they creates. So, so it's confusing to translators. So the original translators always translated God as singular, and even though it's really plural. And
So if we were a balanced molecule, then we would be an Elohim?
well, we'd be a lower cost correspondence of it, kind of. So that the Elohim is most likely a molecule of some type. And what number is in it? Perhaps the closest correspondence we have on the planet would be Shambhala, and their units, they have 7 units in their molecule. Whereas the hierarchy, Christ and his hierarchy have 12 units. And Okay.
I want to point out that I don't know if anybody else has noticed it or not, but the coronavirus is a molecule of 12.
Oh, really? Must be an Antichrist molecule.
How many atoms in a unit?
It's
JJ?
two atoms in a unit, male and female, make one unit. Yeah.
So 1 atom, 1 unit.
Yeah, a male and female make one human atom. Okay, just like a regular atom, hydrogen atom is composed of a negative electron and a positive proton, and a human atom is composed of a male energy and a female energy. Similarly. Okay, the important thing to realize about the male and female energies is they're both of equal importance. And we have the battle of the sexes going on. The females like to say we're more important than you guys, and the males like to say that, and they like to joke about it and so on. But when it comes down to it, they're of equal importance. The female is magnetic, pulls everything from outward to the center, and the male is radiant, and he sends everything outward. So in the universe, we have the radiance of light, which is male, and then the magnetism of gravity that pulls everything outward to the center. And we have the interplay of these two energies that creates the universe that is responsible for the originating Big Bang that exploded us into existence, and then the magnetic energy that pulls us back to the one. And so we have this cycle that goes throughout eternity. So the female energy draws everything to the center, and the female energy does this by believing in the male, and the male must act on that belief. By following this simple principle, any male-female union may have all their desires fulfilled. So when Jesus created the molecule, this continued until the betrayal of Judas. And this is an interesting story because when Jesus created these molecules, we're just told about the 12 pretty much in the Bible. And they went and they were able to do many of the miracles that Jesus did. And then they found one guy that they couldn't heal, and Jesus criticized them for lacking faith, and they couldn't remove the negativity or the evil spirits from the guy. And Jesus says, "This kind cometh not out but by fasting and prayer." And then he healed the guy. And so, but in many cases, they were able to duplicate everything that Jesus did as long as that molecular link was established. And so this continued until he was betrayed by Judas. And after Judas went to betray him, I don't know, maybe Judas didn't have his mind completely made up until the Last Supper. But as Judas left him at the Last Supper and went to betray him, then Jesus then suffered a tremendous lack of energy, because at that point of betrayal, the circulation of the spiritual energy that was going through the molecule was stopped. And it especially affected Jesus in the fact that he was completely drained of spiritual energy, and he took with him just 3 disciples. Peter, James, and John to the Garden of Gethsemane. Now, why didn't he take all the disciples? It's quite possible that they were also drained of energy, that they did not have enough strength to follow him to the garden. But anyway, yeah.
His most powerful triad with them, I think, and even they had a hard time staying awake. But I think they were the most connected of his 12.
Well, JJ, didn't Peter betray him also?
Well, yeah, that's another story. He didn't really betray him, he denied him.
Denied him, that's what I meant.
Because of fear. It was a temporary slip.
He denied him, yeah.
Yeah, unlike Judas, where he made kind of a conscious decision to do it.
And I think it's significant that Peter denied him 3 times.
Right, and he predicted that.
Yep.
And as soon as he realized what he did, he wept, and he really regretted it. Matter of fact, there's legends about people mocking Jesus, that sometimes his enemies would crow like a rooster when he walked by to remind him of his denial. So he suffered a lot over that throughout his life. And the legend even says that when they were going to, that Peter was crucified, and he refused to be crucified right side up because he didn't feel worthy. And he told them to crucify him upside down. And that's the legend anyway. So Peter was extremely regretful over that slip that he made. So anyway, it's interesting, instead of taking all the disciples, he just took 3. So why did he just take 3? And it's quite possible that back in the room where the Last Supper was, the rest of them were asleep and they couldn't even wake him up, because when Judas betrayed them, there was a sapping of the energy, and everyone was very lethargic. And so he took the most potent 3, and there was still some circulation of energy there because of the triad. And so he took them with him. He didn't go alone. Why didn't he go alone to the garden? Because he was facing the crucifixion and everything. So why did he need these 3? He needed these 3 because they produced a spiritual link to make up for that tremendous gap of energy that was lost when Judas betrayed the molecular order. Because just taking the water molecule, for example, you take one hydrogen atom out of it, it's no longer water. Okay. So you take one atom out of a molecule, it's no longer what it is. So Judas left, he betrayed them, and so it was no longer a molecule. And so the qualities of it all of a sudden were not there anymore. And so Jesus was extremely drained. And he went to the garden and he told Peter, James, and John, he says, watch with me 1 hour. And the word watch comes from a Greek word that means stay awake and aware with me 1 hour. Share my awareness with me 1 hour, he pleaded with them. And it says that Jesus began to be very sorrowful and very heavy, says the scripture. Then he saith unto them, my soul is exceedingly sorrowful, even unto death. Tarry here with me and watch. And remember, that word means stay aware with me. Okay. And so he went and he tried to make the connection with his Father. And as he did, his strength was drained, and he went back to the apostles and he says, well, this connection, something's wrong. And he goes back and they were asleep. And he wakes them up and he says, please stay awake with me for 1 hour and stay aware. And 3 different times the apostles were asleep. Now you would think that being aware, now most people read this and they think, boy, that they must have just been sleepy, and they must not have been aware of what was going on. Well, they were aware of what was going on, but the apostles were so drained that they could not stay awake. It wasn't because they needed sleep. It was the molecule was shattered. And Jesus was the only one strong enough to even stay conscious. And 3 different times, and on the 3rd time when they fell asleep, it says, it indicates that Jesus would have actually died. He could not even stay alive because of the energy that was zapped from the molecule. And then what did it say happened when Jesus was at this point near death?
Angels came and supported him.
Right, an angel. It says an angel
An
came.
angel, yeah.
An angel came and appeared to him and strengthened him. Okay.
Right.
And this angel was an angel that was a member of the molecule on the other side. And he came and strengthened him. And then Jesus goes and he wakes up the apostle, the Peter, James, and John. And now all of a sudden they were able to stay awake. And he says, the time is over, I don't need you anymore.
You can go to sleep now.
Yeah. So anyway, then he had enough strength to go ahead and face what he had to face. And after he was crucified, and everyone thought that that nothing much was going to happen after that. Even the apostles were not sure, even though he told them he would rise from the dead. They just turned into ordinary men. They decided to go back into their careers, and they started fishing again, and they just turned into ordinary men. They had no power to do any miracles. And they figured, well, this was an interesting experience, but I guess it's over. And then after the resurrection and Jesus appeared to them, then all of a sudden they changed their mind. And who was the first ones to witness the resurrected Christ?
Well, both Marys were there.
Yeah, his mother and Mary Magdalene were the first. And they went and reported it to the disciples, and they had a hard time believing it was true. But they were just 11 men and women at that time. We don't know who Judas's partner was, what happened to her. But then they met together and they decided, well, we need one more to complete the 12, to complete this molecule. And so they selected Matthias. And after Matthias was selected, and the day of Pentecost, it says this, and with one accord in one place, suddenly there came a sound from heaven as the rushing of a mighty wind, and it filled the house where they were sitting. And there appeared to them cloven tongues, like as of fire, and it sat upon each of them. And they were all filled with the Holy Ghost, and began to speak in other tongues, as the Spirit gave them utterance. And this mighty wind wasn't just something in their imagination, because there was a gathering in Jerusalem of people that spoke, I believe it was like 13 different languages. And they were all gathered for a big meeting there. And they heard this great sound and they followed it where it went. And there was a big crowd gathered outside where the apostles were meeting. And Peter went out and he talked to them. And each one of these people heard Peter speak in their own language, even though Peter was just speaking in his language. These people all heard Peter speaking in their own language. Everybody was able to understand what Peter was saying, even though they represented like 13 different languages. And at that day, it says that the day of Pentecost, it was basically 120 people that still believed in the Christ. Yet at that day, I think it said a couple thousand, I think it was 3,000 people, if I remember right, were converted just by hearing Peter speak. So it's interesting with Jesus, with all these great miracles and performances and teachings that he gave out, just a small handful stayed faithful and believed on his words. But then in 1 hour, many times that number were converted and joined the group. So it's interesting how you can't really go by numbers as to the effect you will eventually have. Because at Jesus' crucifixion, even the apostles that followed him thought, well, this has been an interesting experience, but it looks like it's over. And but it was far from over. So they had a lot of interesting experiences. It doesn't give a lot of them, but the ones it gives is kind of interesting. It talks about Peter's healing energy being so great, it says, insomuch that they brought forth the sick into the streets and laid them on beds and couches, so that at the least the shadow of Peter passing over them might overshadow them and heal them. And so just Peter's shadow going over the sick healed them after the molecule was reestablished. And later we talked about Peter commanded a lady named Tabitha to rise from the dead. So he actually had a person rise from the dead, similar to what Lazarus happened. And then, of course, the time Peter was taken and put in prison and guarded with 16 guards, and he was chained hand and feet and guarded with 16 guards. Now, why did they chain him hand and feet and guard him with 16 guards?
Because they knew he had power to escape.
Yeah, they probably figured these guys are kind of hard to pin down. We're going to make sure this guy doesn't get away.
When Jesus got away, I mean, he would disappear in the midst of his enemies, and they couldn't catch him, and they didn't want Peter to get away like that.
Yeah.
Chained him up. Didn't do him any good.
Yeah,
No.
Jesus goes to his hometown, and he announces that he's the fulfillment of the prophecy of Isaiah, and they were so mad at him, angry, they took him and they were going to cast him off a cliff. And the Bible just says, and he went through their midst, or something like that. So he was able to escape them. They probably didn't know what the world was going on. But anyway, his chains dropped from his hands, and an angel appeared, and his chains dropped from his hands and feet. The 16 guards all fell asleep, and Peter was able to escape from the prison. I don't know if he walked through the walls or what, but it's not clear. And then he went and preached a sermon to the local congregation. And now Philip had a similar experience. He baptized this eunuch character, and then appeared in a town miles away just a short time afterwards. So there's an implication that he experienced teleportation. Now, there was probably a big variety in the manifestations, because even with the molecular links, the apostles had to apply faith to make anything happen. But when that link was established, and the disciples felt that link, it increased their faith a tremendous amount. Because if you have the consciousness, like you have backup, then you're willing to be much more bold than if you don't feel that backup of energy in your consciousness. So once you sense that link, then it can give you a much greater sense of confidence and faith. So kind of interesting. Okay. So the last words of Jesus to the disciples was to go out and teach all nations. And he says to them that I will be with you always, even until the end of the age, or the end of the world as it's translated, but it really means age. And so the disciples went out to different parts of the world. They were unable to gather together except on subtle planes. And they were all eventually killed except for John the Revelator. And after they were killed, the teaching was lost. The other ones that he gathered must have lost the vision. And the regular church began to take over and establish the authority of the beast, so to speak. So the power of the beast, the power of the molecule was replaced by the power of the beast, where you had to conform or else be punished, imprisoned, killed, or whatever. And it turned out that as the church began to become established, the church began to persecute those who still had the vision of the molecule until it was pretty much, the teaching of it was suppressed and lost. And then the next time the molecule was established was in the days of King Arthur. The legend still survives that they had the round table, and there's different stories, all kinds of different stories about it, but one of them is that there were 12 knights and 12 females met around the round table. And the sword Excalibur was a symbol of the power of the molecule. And when the sword was lost, the power of the molecule was lost, and the knights just became like ordinary men when this was lost. And then there's a scripture that says this: there appeared a great wonder in heaven, a woman symbolizing the power of the molecule, utilizing female and male energy. A woman clothed with the sun representing the consciousness of the Spirit of God, or the soul, and the moon under her feet, symbolizing the emotions under the control of the soul. And upon her head, a crown of 12 stars, symbolizing the power of the molecule, manifested through the 12 male-female units. And she brought forth a man-child, symbolizing the Christ, who was to rule all nations with a rod of iron, symbolizing the power of truth. And her child was caught up unto God and to his throne, symbolizing the ascension. And the woman fled into the wilderness, for she had a place prepared that they should feed her 1,260 days. So the last molecule that was on the earth was in the days of King Arthur. And that was somewhere around the middle of the 6th century, which I believe was right around the year 570. And then the 1,260 days, in prophecy, a day often symbolizes a year. So there was a time period, he says, that the church would be in the wilderness. In other words, the true church, the power behind the Church of Christ, so to speak, or the molecular order, would be in the wilderness, away from humanity for 1,260 years. And then,
JJ, I got a question.
Yeah.
Didn't Steve Asia, him and his group of 12, didn't they create not by accident, but through practice and understanding, create that molecule that of 12 that created energy that they seen, that they taped it and showed the phenomena of energy coming through with that group of 12. And there was another group also, I think they were working with a group of 12 in today's terms that, oh, I know, yeah, a preacher I know, when he was in prison, that's when he started his ministry. And they did a group of 12, and by accident, they brought in a spark of energy that they even have it on camera from the prison when they were filming that room.
Yeah.
But that's being created more and more now.
Yeah, any,
You have
What
the-
you're talking about.
we're going to talk about more about that later on, but there's any group gathers together and touches the soul, magical things can happen. But the creation of a molecule is a little bit different principle than just getting 12 together. And we'll talk about that as we go along here.
Stacy, can you post those 2 videos that you're referring to in the molecular group?
Did you hear that, Stacy?
Which 2 videos were that?
The ones you just talked about?
Yeah,
Thanks.
I'll put something up.
Okay, anyway, in 1830, the foundation of the molecule was reestablished. So between around 570 to 1830, 1260 years, that's a possibility of interpretation. But Joseph Smith attempted to create a molecule of 12, and each one of the 12 was had a female companion, but I don't think people back then had the vision of how molecules work, because back then they didn't even understand what a molecule was back in the 1830s to 1844. But Joseph did understand the balance of the male-female energy, and he did what he could to balance the energies. And he had this vision to create this temple in Kirkland, Ohio. And he was given him and 2 others, Cindy Rigdon, or him and Sidney Rigdon, I believe it was, they were shown exactly how to build this temple, and they both saw it together at the same time. And they built this, and when he built it, after it was built and dedicated, they he in the different rooms, they had different numbers of 12, 24, 48, 96. And he, at the dedication, it says that he went around to the different rooms to try to get them organized in the correct numbers, in the correct order, so that they could receive a manifestation. And because what's interesting is he predicted this. He predicted that there would be a tremendous spiritual manifestation there. And then and the people didn't understand what he was trying to do when he tried to create these molecular numbers and associating with the different groups he had organized there. And then when the right organization was in play, then a cloud of light descended upon the temple and lit up the countryside. And I visited and went through the temple there, and the tour guide told us about that experience, and reported that, told us that a newspaper the next day reported that the temple had burned down, because the residents nearby looked at the temple and they actually saw it looked like it was on fire. So the fire that descended upon the temple wasn't just something seen with spiritual eyes, but even the enemies of the church saw that the temple was lit up with a spiritual fire.
It was an
So,
endowment of power.
right. And what's interesting was that after this happened, and during this time, people saw heavenly beings and they had all kinds of spiritual experiences. And they saw angels come down and sit with them. And so it was quite an experience. And after that experience, after they were chased out of Ohio, and then they started to build the temple in Nauvoo, Joseph told them that, or he received a revelation that when a temple is approved by God, it would have this endowment happen. And just before the temple was completed, Joseph was killed. And Brigham Young attempted to finish the temple, and everyone was expecting the same thing to happen, that the spiritual fire would manifest. And the revelations that Joseph gives said that if such a temple is approved by God, the glory of God would be manifest within it. And so everyone was hoping this would happen, but then when they dedicated it, nothing happened. And a lot of people were disappointed that there was not the same experience. And so the link was pretty much lost, because after Joseph was killed, people didn't have a vision. The future leaders just didn't understand the molecular principles. And even Joseph was limited in his understanding because they didn't have the technology or the knowledge of atoms and molecules back then. Now we have the advantage of being able to see how the microcosmic world actually works. And so anyway, we'll take off on that. It says this, so we'll cover just one more thing. It says, after this, talking about the 1260 years, at this point, and I believe this point happened at Joseph's death, at this point, the woman fled into the wilderness the second time. The wording is slightly different from the first scripture. It says, and to the woman were given 2 wings of a great eagle, that she might fly into the wilderness, into her place, where she is nourished for a time and times and a half a time from the face of the serpent. 2 wings of the great eagle symbolizes what?
The United States.
United States, right. And to the woman, which symbolizing the molecule, were given 2 wings of a great eagle, that she might fly into the wilderness. So the power of the molecule goes in the wilderness again for a time and times and a half a time. That could equal, a time means 1 cycle, times means 2, and a half a time means half that, which is like 3.5 years. 3.5 years equals 1,260 days. So that can be interpreted a lot of ways. 42 months. It's this time cycle keeps reappearing again and again in the scriptures. And so we have 3.5 cycles of time between 1844 and the time when the molecule is connected again. And what time period that is, we don't know for sure. But when it happens and we figure the time sequence, it'll probably have an interesting correspondence to it.
How about if the time was 100 years?
Yeah, then that'd be 350 years. That'd be sometime in the future yet.
Be down the road.
Okay. So Okay, any other comments or questions before we call it off? We're a little bit over time.
I think I saw Peter's chains in the Vatican.
They still have the chains?
Yes.
Yeah, it's
Mm.
interesting. They say there's enough pieces of the cross that people claim to have to build several crosses.
Yeah, they were very, very big.
But
Big
yeah, you never know about those stories. They do think some of the stories are true about where certain people are buried, like where Peter is supposed to be buried. They think he's probably really buried in that location.
Yeah.
But
The basilica.
yeah, they have that church dedicated to him there. Yeah. Okay, any other comments or questions before we wrap it up here? Well, good to see you all, and we will see you next Sunday at 2 o'clock. You'll all being well.
All be well.
And we get into the nitty gritty of the molecule next time. We're going to get into how it
You
works.
guys, thank you.
Oh,
Thank
good to
you.
see you on.
Bye, JJ. Thank you for today's class.
You betcha.
Yeah. Wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you.